Wish you all a good morning and a blessed Sabbath. I'd like to begin this health minute with a text in the book of Psalms 19, verse 8. And it reads, "The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes." And that's what I would like to speak about, the eyes. Now, when we look around, we see a great variety of things. We see different colors, we see different textures, we're able to discern distance of several things. And this is all possible through one of the most important senses that we have, the two spheroids we have in our head, called the eyes. Now, what is encompassed by the eyes? We know the outer layer, we have the cornea, then beyond that we have the iris, we have the little black ball or the little black hole called the pupil, which lets light in. We have the lens, we have the retina in the back. We're going to start off with the retina, which is the most important one. So we know the pupil lets in light, a very specific type of light. We call the visual spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So we have that very small margin of things that we can see. And to the right, we have larger waves, which are called less energy potent, such as radio waves, such as microwaves, which we interact with every day if we have a cell phone. And we also have infrared, which we emit because we're alive. But in this spectrum, if we get light, absorb light from the spectrum, from the visual spectrum, it goes to the back of our eyes, to the iris, to the retina, And in the retina, we have certain types of nerve cells called photoreceptor cells. Now, we have two different types of photoreceptor cells. We have rods and we have cones. Now, we have approximately 120 million rods and about 6 million cones in each eye. Now, what's the purpose of these two types of cells? The cones are used for color. We have the basic yellow, we have the basic blue, and we have the basic red. And from these colors, we have all the combinations of what we can see. We can see approximately about 100 million or a million different types of colors. Now, whether we perceive those is different, but we are capable of seeing these types of colors. Now, the rods, which we have much more of, are light sensitive in a way that we can see more things in terms of darkness. So what we can see in the dark is predominantly determined by the rods, the cells, which are the rods. And if we look at certain animals, for example, animals in the deep sea, they don't have any cones. They only have rods. So we know that they don't see in color. Now these cells, once they receive the light, they go to something called the opsins. Now the opsins are pigment molecules which then transmit that information through the optic nerve to the brain and tells us exactly what the color is. And in these cones, we have three different sizes. We have what scientists call S, M, and L, very scientific for short, medium, and large. And these help us to see the different types of wavelengths. So short wavelength, for example, violet, those are short cones, and long wavelengths, for example, like red, these are the long cones. Now, there are different types of abnormalities, we can say, within the sight. We have what is called tetrachromats, which, unfortunately, guys, these are mostly super women, that they can see not 1 million, but 100 million different types of colors. We also have the opposite, dichromats, which means you only have 2 cones, and means you can only see about 10,000 different colors. So we call these people colorblind. So mostly they can see the yellows and the blues, but they have difficulty with the mixtures of red. But we also have two more. I like to mention heterochromia, which I think we're probably familiar with. Those who like Siberian Huskies are familiar with this because those are the ones that have different eyes, colors. I had a friend in 7th grade. He had one blue eye and one green eye. And a cousin of his had one blue eye, about 3/4 of one was green and the other quarter was brown. So these are different types of phenomena which you find. But the one which I find most interesting is a variation of epiphania is what it's called. Epiphania, what happens is the brain deceives you by what you see. The brain naturally wants to pick up patterns, and so when you see something, it tells you, it fills in the blanks, and mostly this happens if you have 3 points. Now, psychologists have done studies with children, and they put 1 point in the top and 2 points in the bottom, like a triangle, and the child doesn't really notice anything. He just keeps on looking. But if you flip that around, you put 2 points in the top and 1 point in the bottom, now the child seems like he sees a face. And we have that same problem. Have you ever noticed that when you see some cars, you see 2 headlights and you see a grill, and it almost looks like a face? That's that phenomenon called epiphania. But since this is the health minutes, these are the health minutes, we have to enter some bit of health into the eyes. Okay, so we know how it works, and now we have to know what we have to do to keep them in the condition that God intended us for. People like me, I'm wearing contacts. We need contacts because when the light comes in, it doesn't focus properly in the back of our eyes, in the retina. So what the contacts does is bends the light so that we can see images sharply, right? One thing we have to be careful is UV light, ultraviolet rays. Now we know that through the deterioration of the ozone, more ultraviolet rays penetrates our ozone, and it can be damaging to our eyes. That's why one of the first things we learn in science class as a kid is don't look directly at the sun, because it can damage the cells in our eyes. Another thing is don't look at things that are too bright, or don't stare at things for too long, TV or the computer, because it puts an excess strain on these cells, which we can think of as little muscles. And when you do that, they begin to deteriorate, and we lose our sight. Another thing is don't read in the dark or don't look in things that are too dark for too long. The cells, the rods take approximately 5 minutes to adjust to the light, and if we're constantly in darkness, also puts too much strain on them. Someone asked me the other week, Elvis, why do you always wear sunglasses? I always wear sunglasses because I want to keep my eyes healthy. Another thing for women that don't want to have lines on their faces, sunglasses. That way you're not squinting and you don't see the lines. What happens if something happens to your eye and you need help? Well, I've had different problems, whether I buried 2 years in a row for some reason at the same season. I don't know if it was pollen season or what, my eyes would get really, really red. And I couldn't read and I couldn't see the professor very well. And I would go to the nurse and she would ask me, do you play video games? I said, no, but I don't see the connection there. She said, because sometimes I get a lot of students that they're playing video games and they share the controllers and they put their hands in their eyes. I said, oh no, I don't put my hands in my eyes, so that's not a problem. But I realized that if you get those little tea packets of chamomile, my mom told me this, and you boil it in a little bit of water, and then you put that water in your eyes and you put the little chamomile tea bag on top of your eye, it really helps to alleviate any redness or any irritation of the eyes. In more severe cases, if you have an accident and for some reason you damage the cornea, Brother Ahukum, I've never done this before, but if you can imagine red onions, they burn just looking at them. And he grated it and he got the juice and he put that in his eye. And it helped him quite a bit, but yeah, it's a difficult pill to swallow. But this is my health minute. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we've learned a little bit about physics and a little bit about biology too. And I hope that we can use our sights. And as the verse read, that we may allow that the Lord's light may enlighten our eyes and our bodies. Amen.
Amen. Now, let's go to our Sabbath school report. I'm going to ask Sister Persia.